Why is it that two people can earn almost exactly the same salary, live in the same kind of apartment, shop at the same stores, and 20 years later, one of them has a real, meaningful amount of money saved, and the other has almost nothing to show for 2 decades of work? It's not because one of them is smarter. It's not because one of them got lucky with a stock pick, started a side business, or inherited something. In most cases, neither of those things happened. The actual answer is almost insultingly simple, and I think that's exactly why most people never act on it. It doesn't feel like the kind of answer that should work. So today, I want to walk through that difference, not as a motivational thing, just as a fairly cold look at what actually separates people who end up financially comfortable from people who don't, even when their paychecks look almost identical. Picture someone in their late 20s. Let's say they're in Chicago, or maybe Lisbon, or Manchester. The city doesn't really matter, because this scene plays out almost identically across most of the US and Europe. They have a steady job, decent salary, nothing extravagant. Rent takes a big chunk. Groceries, transport, a few subscriptions, the occasional dinner out. By the time the month ends, there's a little left over. Sometimes, some months, there isn't. They tell themselves, once I get a raise, I'll start saving seriously. Once things calm down a bit. Once, I'm not so tight every month. This is a completely reasonable thing to think. It's also, statistically, one of the most common ways people end up with no savings well into their 30s and 40s. Now picture a second person. Same income, same city, same basic lifestyle. The only difference? The day their paycheck arrives, a fixed amount, say 10% of it, moves automatically into a separate account before they ever see it sitting in their checking balance. They didn't decide to save this month. They decided once, a long time ago, and then never had to decide again. On paper, these two people look almost identical for years. Same job title, similar apartment, similar weekend plans. The difference between them isn't visible at all, not at first. That's actually part of what makes this whole topic so easy to ignore. There's no obvious warning sign telling you which path you're on. Here's the part that's a little uncomfortable to admit. The plan to save what's left over isn't really a plan. It's a hope, because the amount left over at the end of the month isn't a fixed number. It's whatever remains after every other expense, rent, food, that thing that came up, the dinner you didn't plan for, has already taken its share. Spending doesn't wait politely to see what's left for saving. Spending happens first, automatically, almost without thinking. Saving in this model is what's left after everything else has already won. This isn't a personal failure. It's just how attention and money work. The bills are due on a date. The rent is due on a date. Save more this month isn't due on any date, so it's the easiest commitment to quietly skip. There's a fairly well-documented idea in behavioral economics that explains this. People consistently overweight, present comfort, and underweight future benefit, even when they fully understand the math. Researchers sometimes call this present bias. It's not about intelligence. It's about how human attention is wired. The cost of spending today is invisible, and the benefit of saving today is invisible too, just in the opposite direction. And there's a second effect working against the save what's left approach: lifestyle creep. As income rises, a raise, a bonus, a better job, spending tends to rise right alongside it, often without anyone consciously deciding it should. The takeout becomes a little more frequent. The apartment gets a little nicer. None of it feels like a decision. It just sort of happens. So the leftover amount doesn't really grow as income grows. It just keeps recalibrating to roughly the same gap, year after year, regardless of the number on the paycheck. So here's the actual fix, and I want to be honest, it's not clever. It's almost embarrassingly simple. You don't save what's left after spending. You spend what's left after saving. The order matters more than almost anything else in personal finance. Same income, same percentage. The only difference is which one happens first. In practice, this is just one decision. Set up an automatic transfer for the day your income arrives. Some people call this paying yourself first. It sounds like a phrase from a motivational poster, but the mechanism behind it is genuinely just basic behavioral design. You're not relying on willpower at the moment of temptation. You're removing the moment of temptation entirely. By the time you'd even think about spending that portion, it's already gone. Sitting in an account you don't casually check. This is the entire secret, if you want to call it that. There's no second part, no advanced version. The advanced version is just doing this for longer and resisting the urge to interfere with it. Now here's where most people's eyes glaze over. And I understand why, because compound growth is genuinely hard to feel intuitively. So let's make it concrete instead of abstract, with real numbers. Let's go back to our two people. Same income, same city, same lifestyle. Both decide to invest $300 a month, or €300. The math works out almost the same either way. Person A starts at age 25. Person B has every intention of doing the same thing, but keeps meaning to start once things settle down. They finally start at 35. Same $300 a month, same investment approach, just 10 years later. Assuming a 7% average annual return, here's roughly where they end up by age 65. Person A, investing from 25 to 65, 40 years, ends up with approximately $719,000. Person B, investing from 35 to 65, 30 years, ends up with approximately $340,000. Look at that gap again. Person A only invested for 10 more years than Person B, 25% more time. But they ended up with more than double the money, not because they invested more money overall, though they did contribute more in total. The bigger reason is that the earliest dollars had the most time to grow on top of themselves. The contributions made in your 20s aren't just some of the money. In this kind of math, they're often the most valuable dollars you'll ever invest, simply because of how long they get to compound. Here's a way to make that feel more real. Person B would need to contribute roughly double the monthly amount, close to $600 a month instead of $300, just to catch up to where Person A ends up, purely to make up for the lost decade. That's the actual cost of waiting. It's not abstract, it's a specific calculable number, and it's a lot larger than most people assume. This is the uncomfortable part of the math. Starting early and modestly tends to beat starting late and aggressively. Most people assume the opposite is true. It usually isn't. There's actually a third person worth mentioning, because they represent the most common outcome of all. This person also intends to start at 35, but 35 turns into 38, which turns into after the wedding, which turns into after we buy the apartment, which turns into 45. By the time they actually open an account and start that automatic transfer, half their working life is already behind them. This isn't a story about a careless person. It's a story about a normal person, making individually reasonable decisions, none of which felt like, I am choosing to delay my financial future. Each delay felt small. The cumulative effect wasn't small at all. If we run the same $300 a month math starting at 45 instead of 35, the 20 years to age 65 produces roughly $147,000, less than a quarter of what Person A ends up with, despite working basically the same number of total years and earning a similar income throughout. The point isn't to feel anxious about this. The point is that I'll start when things settle down is rarely a neutral choice. It's a choice with a price tag, even if no one ever shows you the invoice. I think it's worth being honest about why this advice doesn't spread the way other financial content does. There's no dramatic before and after here, no risky bet that paid off, no clever insight that nobody else had. Just a transfer, set up once, left alone for a very long time. It doesn't make for an exciting story. You can't really tell it at dinner. I automated a transfer in my 20s and didn't think about it again. Isn't the kind of thing that gets applause. But maybe that's actually a useful filter. If a financial strategy makes for a great story, it's often because it involved risk, timing, or luck, things that are hard to repeat reliably. If a financial strategy is boring enough to forget about, that's usually a sign. It's working exactly as intended, quietly, in the background, without needing your attention. If you want to actually do this rather than just nod along, the setup itself takes about 10 minutes, one time. Decide on a percentage or fixed amount of your income, even a modest one. Schedule an automatic transfer for the day your paycheck lands, moving straight into a savings or investment account you don't casually access. And then, this is the part people underestimate, leave it alone. Don't pause it during a tight month. Don't, just this once, turn it off. The entire value of this habit comes from its consistency, not its size. It's not about finding extra money. It's about deciding once that a portion of your income was never really available to spend in the first place. So if two people earning the same income can end up in completely different financial positions 20 or 30 years later, the difference usually isn't intelligence, luck, or income. It's one decision, made early and left alone. That's really it. It was never a secret. It was just too boring for most people to bother with. If this was useful, subscribe. I'm making more of these. The boring stuff that actually works, not the noise.